Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The barrel of the gun was cold against Mateo's temple, but the rain soaking through his mechanic's jumpsuit was colder. Last chance, pair, the lone shark hissed, his breath reeking of cheap gin and stale cigarettes, the neon lights of the Manila alleyway flickering ominously above them. You pay up, or we take it out on that kid of yours. Mateo didn't flinch at the threat to his own life, but the mention of his son, Leo, made the rage boil in his gut, a primal, molten heat that threatened to spill over. He spat a mouthful of blood onto the wet asphalt, his hands zip-tied behind his back, kneeling in the filth of the gutter. He was a large man, built from years of labor and hardship, broad-shouldered and calloused, but tonight he was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. "Touch my son," Mateo growled, his voice a low rumble of thunder, "and I'll kill you. I don't care if I'm already dead." The thug laughed, cocking the hammer. "You're in no position to." Click. It wasn't the sound of the trigger. It was the sharp, distinctive sound of a car door closing. Not just any car. The heavy, pressurized thud of an armored luxury sedan. The alley went silent. The thugs looked up, squinting through the downpour. A silhouette emerged from the blinding white headlights of a sleek, black Maybach. The figure moved with an elegance that didn't belong in this gritty district, stepping over puddles with polished Italian leather shoes. A bodyguard held a black umbrella over him, shielding him from the storm, while 4 other men in suits materialized from the shadows, their weapons drawn with professional precision. "I believe," a velvet voice cut through the rain, smooth and deadly as a silk-wrapped knife, "that man belongs to me." Mateo's heart stopped. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in 5 years, not since the funeral, but it haunted his dreams with a persistence he'd never admitted to himself. He looked up, water dripping into his eyes, and saw him. Julian, his old college best friend, his compadre, the godfather of his son, and the man Mateo had run away from because the way Julian looked at him made Mateo question every straight line in his life. Julian didn't look at the gunman. He looked only at Mateo, his dark eyes sweeping over the bruises, the blood, and the humiliation. His expression was unreadable, a mask of icy aristocracy that hid the fire beneath. "Julian," Mateo choked out. "Get in the car, Mateo," Julian said softly, gesturing with a manicured hand as his security detail disarmed the thugs with brutal efficiency. "We have a lot of catching up to do." The silence inside the penthouse was deafening. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the streets below. Here, 40 floors up, the city of Manila was just a glittering tapestry of lights, beautiful and distant. The air was cool, scented with sandalwood and old money. Mateo stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, clutching a towel Julian had thrown at him. He had showered in a bathroom larger than his entire apartment, washing away the grime and blood, but the shame clung to him like a second skin. He was wearing a set of Julian's silk pajamas, midnight blue, that were slightly too tight across his broad chest. Julian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of amber whiskey. He had shed his suit jacket, rolling the sleeves of his white dress shirt up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were deceptive in their strength. 75,000, Julian said, not turning around. "That was the debt? For your wife's hospital bills? Or for Leo's tuition?" "Both," Mateo muttered, his gaze fixed on the marble floor. "Business at the shop has been slow. I didn't want to ask you." "You never ask." Julian turned, his gaze sharp. "You disappear. 5 years, Mateo. You buried your wife, and then you buried yourself. You cut me off. I had to hire a private investigator just to find out my godson was eating instant noodles for dinner while his father got beaten to a pulp. I didn't want your charity," Mateo snapped, his pride flaring up. "We live in different worlds, Julian. You're a CEO. You run an empire. I change tires." And yet, Julian walked closer, the sound of his footsteps swallowed by the plush carpet. "Tonight, I bought your debt. I own it now. Which means, technically, I own you." Mateo's breath hitched. He looked up, locking eyes with the man he had called brother for so long. There was something in Julian's eyes, a hunger that hadn't dimmed with time. It was the reason Mateo had fled years ago. The lingering touches, the intense stares during late-night drinking sessions, the tension that felt like a pulled rubber band ready to snap. "What do you want, Julian?" Matteo asked, his voice rough. "You want me to pay you back? I'll work." I don't want your money," Julian interrupted, stepping into Matteo's personal space. He reached out, his cool fingers brushing a bruise on Matteo's jawline. Matteo flinched, not from pain, but from the electric jolt that shot down his spine. "I need a head of security. Someone I trust. Someone who would take a bullet without asking why. Someone who understands loyalty." "You have an army of security," Matteo argued weakly, though his body was betraying him, leaning almost imperceptibly into the touch. "Mercenaries," Julian dismissed. "I need you. You move in here. You watch my back. You drive me. You live with me. In exchange, the debt is wiped. Leo goes to the best international school in the city. All expenses paid." It was a deal with the devil. Matteo knew it. But the devil had the face of an angel he had secretly worshipped for a decade. "And if I say no?" Julian smiled, a slow, predatory curve of his lips. "You won't. You're a good father, Matteo. You'll do anything for your son, even if it means selling your soul to your best friend." The arrangement was torture. Exquisite, slow-burning torture. For 3 months, Matteo lived in the shadow of Julian's brilliance. He drove the Maybach, stood guard at boring board meetings, and threw menacing glares at anyone who looked at Julian the wrong way. He watched Julian charm investors, destroy rivals with a smile, and navigate the treacherous waters of high society. But the hardest part wasn't the job. It was the domesticity. It was the mornings when Matteo would find Julian at the kitchen island, drinking espresso, hair messy from sleep, looking soft and touchable. It was the late nights when Julian would come home exhausted, tie undone, asking Matteo to pour him a drink. They fell back into their old rhythm. The banter, the shared jokes, but the undercurrent had changed. It was heavier, darker. The compare dynamic was fraying, revealing the raw desire underneath. One rainy Tuesday, the tension finally reached its breaking point. Julian had dragged Matteo to a high-profile gala. A rival businessman, a slimy tycoon named Mr. Tan, had spent the evening making veiled threats against Julian's company. Matteo had stood by the wall, his hand hovering near his concealed holster, watching every movement. When they returned to the penthouse, Julian was seething. He paced the living room, tearing off his cufflinks and throwing them onto the table. "He thinks he can corner me," Julian muttered, pacing like a caged tiger. "He thinks because I play by the rules, I won't bite back. He's scared of you," Matteo said from the doorway, loosening his own tie. "That's why he's barking." Julian stopped and looked at Matteo. The adrenaline of the night seemed to shift into something else. He walked over to Matteo, his eyes dark. "And you?" Julian whispered. "Are you scared of me?" Matteo swallowed hard. "I've never been scared of you, Julian." "Liar," Julian breathed. He reached out, grabbing Matteo's tie and yanking him forward. Their chests collided. "You're terrified. You ran away 5 years ago because you were scared of this." "I was married," Matteo said, his voice trembling. "I had a wife. I had a duty." "She's gone, Matteo," Julian said, his voice dropping to a desperate rasp. "And I'm still here. I've always been here, waiting for you to stop pretending you don't feel it too." "Feel what?" Matteo feigned ignorance, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "This." Julian didn't wait. He surged forward, crashing his lips against Matteo's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision of years of repressed longing, frustration, and anger. It was dominant and demanding. Julian bit at Matteo's lower lip, forcing him to open up, his tongue invading Matteo's mouth with possessive heat. Matteo's instinct was to push him away, to retreat to the safety of just friends. But his body betrayed him. His hands, acting on their own accord, flew up to grip Julian's waist, pulling him closer. He groaned into the kiss, the sound vibrating in his throat. Julian tasted like whiskey and danger. He pushed Matteo backward until his legs hit the edge of the heavy oak desk. With a shove, Julian forced Matteo to sit on the edge, stepping between his spread thighs. The power dynamic shifted instantly. The mechanic, usually the protector, was now at the mercy of the executive. Julian broke the kiss, gasping for air, his forehead resting against Matteo's. "Tell me to stop," he challenged, his hands moving up to unbutton Mateo's shirt. Call me Pear. Tell me we're just buddies. Tell me to stop, and I will never touch you again. Mateo looked into Julian's eyes. He saw the vulnerability there, hidden behind the arrogance. He saw the lonely man who had everything but the one thing he truly wanted. I can't, Mateo whispered, surrendering. Julian's eyes darkened. He pushed Mateo's shirt off his shoulders, his hands tracing the scars on Mateo's chest, scars earned from working, fighting, living. Then don't. The affair that followed was intense and secretive. By day, Mateo was the stoic bodyguard, opening doors and scanning crowds. By night, in the privacy of the penthouse, he belonged to Julian completely. But happiness in their world was fragile. The threat from Mr. Tan hadn't disappeared. It had only gone underground. 2 weeks later, Mateo was driving Julian to a site inspection at a warehouse district. It was a trap. Mateo realized it a split second before the SUV blocked their path. Get down, Mateo roared, shoving Julian's head down just as the windshield shattered under a hail of bullets. The armored glass held for a moment, spiderwebbing but not breaking. Mateo slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching, spinning the Maybach around with expert precision. But another car blocked their rear. They boxed us in, Mateo gritted out, drawing his weapon. Stay in the car, Julian. Do not open this door. Mateo, no. Julian screamed, grabbing his arm. Don't go out there. It's my job, Mateo said, looking at Julian one last time. I have to clear a path. Mateo kicked the door open and rolled out onto the pavement, using the car door as a shield. Gunfire erupted around him. He took out 2 assailants with practiced aim, his military background kicking in. He moved toward the lead car, suppressing their fire, creating a gap. He was winning. He was clearing the way. Then, he saw the red laser dot on his chest. He didn't have time to think. He only had time to move. But as he turned to take cover, he saw a gunman aiming not at him, but at the rear window where Julian was. Mateo threw himself into the line of fire. The impact was like a sledgehammer to the shoulder. He spun around, hitting the ground hard. Pain exploded in his upper body, hot and blinding. Mateo, through the ringing in his ears, he heard the scream. It wasn't the scream of a CEO. It was the scream of a man watching his heart get ripped out. Julian was out of the car. He had picked up Mateo's dropped gun and was firing blindly at the retreating attackers, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His security team arrived seconds later, sirens wailing in the distance, but Julian didn't care. He dropped the gun and fell to his knees beside Mateo, ignoring the blood soaking into his pristine suit trousers. You idiot, Julian sobbed, pressing his hands over the wound. You stupid, stubborn idiot. I told you to stay inside. Had to. Protect the boss, Mateo wheezed, blood bubbling at the corner of his lips. He reached up, his calloused hand trembling as he cupped Julian's cheek. Don't cry, Pear. Ruins the image. Shut up, Julian cried, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the rain that had started to fall. You don't get to die. You owe me. You hear me? You still owe me. I think. Mateo smiled weakly, his vision fading to black. I think the debt is paid. The beep of the heart monitor was the first thing Mateo heard. He blinked his eyes open, the harsh white light of the hospital room stinging his retinas. His shoulder throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. He tried to move, but a weight on his good hand stopped him. Julian was asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair, his head resting on the edge of the bed, his hand gripping Mateo's fingers so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked terrible, stubble on his chin, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same blood-stained shirt from the attack. Mateo squeezed his hand weakly. Julian's head snapped up. For a second, he looked disoriented, and then relief washed over his face, so profound it looked like pain. You're awake, Julian breathed. He stood up, hovering over Mateo, afraid to touch him. Did we get them? Mateo croaked, his throat dry. They're in police custody. Tan is finished. Julian dismissed it with a wave of his hand. I don't care about them. He leaned down, resting his forehead against Mateo's uninjured shoulder. You scared me, Mateo? You scared me more than I have ever been in my life. Sorry, Mateo whispered. Habit. I'm firing you, Julian said into the sheets. Mateo's heart sank. What? Julian pulled back, his eyes red-rimmed but fierce. I'm firing you as my bodyguard. I can't. I can't watch you take a bullet for me again. I can't function thinking you're in danger because of me. Then what am I supposed to do? Mateo asked, panic rising. Go back to the shop? Leave the penthouse? No, Julian said firmly. You're not leaving. You're never leaving. But you're not my employee anymore. Julian took a deep breath, his composure returning. The mask of the powerful Soon was slipping back into place, but softened by love. I need a partner, Mateo. In everything. I have plenty of security guards. I have plenty of yes men. But I only have one. Soulmate. Mateo stared at him. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Partner. Mateo tested the word. Partner, Julian confirmed. We raise Leo together. You run the logistics for the company, from a desk, where it's safe. And at night, you belong to me. No debts. No contracts. Just us. Mateo looked at the man who had saved him, challenged him, and loved him through years of silence. He thought about the fear he had felt, the pride that had held him back, and realized none of it mattered compared to the warmth of Julian's hand in his. Okay, Mateo smiled, a genuine, tired smile. But I'm still driving the Maybach. You drive like a maniac. Julian laughed, a wet, choked sound, and leaned down to kiss him. It was a gentle kiss, full of promises and a future that no longer had to be hidden in the dark. Deal, Julian whispered against his lips. Welcome home, pair. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, turning a debt of money into a lifetime of devotion. If you enjoyed seeing the rugged protector finally surrender to his desires, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you risk your life for a love that society says is wrong? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Julian, handsome CEO, wearing unbuttoned white dress shirt with blood stains, disheveled hair, tearful expression, desperate, kneeling by hospital bed, holding hand of man 2. Man 2. Mateo, rugged mechanic, muscular build, lying in hospital bed, bandages on shoulder and chest, hooked to foredrip, reaching up to touch cheek of man 1. Gentle smile. Background is sterile hospital room, heart monitor, rain against window, cinematic lighting, emotional atmosphere, sharp focus, intricate details.